I'm super honored to be joined by John Natale, owner of Natale. Thank you so much. Welcome to the pod, John.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this conversation today.
Me too, because you do a multitude of things. So tell us before we jump into social media stuff, what is Natale?
It used to be something simple. You know, I've been in real estate for a long time. I get, though, that the challenges that many in the millennial generation, especially millennials and younger, are going to have to buy their first home. And for about 16 years now, since 2008. And at this point, Natale is, like you said, a few different things. I have a real estate company. So we own Natale Realtors. I own a coaching company as well, Natale Coaching. And we've launched it, but now we're actually really diving into it, the Natale Media side of things. So we have a whole encompassing brand built around my personal brand, which I'm sure we'll dive into today.
And social media, I'm sure, plays a very interesting role in all of this. And I'm sure maybe kind of helps some of this unfold. So tell me a little bit about what platforms you're on, how long you've been on them, and how that all started.
So it's a great question. Let's talk about the classics, right? Facebook, Instagram, I've been on since I started in real estate, right? You know, in 2007 or 2006, I probably got a Facebook account going into college and whatnot. Back when you used to just post to your wall and update it, you would say John Natale is doing something back in the golden days. But for real estate, for a long time there, if we're being honest, that was what social media was. It was leveraging your sphere. It was talking to your sphere and not really growing outside of that. Everything, I think, if we're being honest, changed around COVID slightly before. And so now, obviously, Facebook, Instagram, we still utilize very heavily. In the summer of 23, so a little under a year ago, I went all in on TikTok. And that's what's really blown up everything we just talked about, those three companies, that the entire Natale brand has been amplified through TikTok. I also utilize YouTube as well, mostly just on the agent-facing side. That's where my podcast goes, and some of the help and some of the things I do for agents is on that side. But as of right now, those are the big ones. I have a LinkedIn, and I would throw it in there because I think a lot of agents forget about it. And it's not a social platform, but that's Google My Business or Google Business Profile. We use a lot to leverage things around here for people to contact us.
That is really interesting because we just had a conversation about Google My Business in my subscription program. So before I forget to ask about it, when you say we use it a lot, what are you posting to it, or how are you utilizing it?
So we have a really cool CRM that I just started with. It's these two young kids that designed it. And so I basically can post from there on all of my platforms. So it makes it really easy. And on top of that, though, really just kind of whatever is going on Facebook and Instagram, like kind of what you're putting out for your sphere, like the just sold, the just listed, some short videos. I can't post my 7-minute videos or walkthrough tours on Google Business Profile, at least not yet. But everything like those still images, updates for us from like the brokerage sides, like Agent of the Month, all the awards that we do for the agents at our company, all of that stuff goes there. And I think that heavily impacts your Google score or whatever you want to SEO, whatever you want to consider it at this point. But when people look for real estate professionals in our area or or a company to join, because that's mostly on the brokerage side, what we're worrying about too, it helps a lot. So we really just try to post at least once a day to there. And it's usually just still images, a little bit of AI generated content beneath it. And that keeps us pretty steady on Google.
I love that you brought that up. I do think it is a platform that gets forgotten about, that we can actually quote unquote post to it versus like set it and forget it. So still images, short videos. Is there a max length on those?
Depends on the file size. So, it depends on what you're shooting on.
And then have you seen like engagement on them, or it's just SEO type stuff?
For us, like I don't do Google pay-per-click advertising. So for us, it's like what I measure it by is like how much are people interacting with our Google. And the next, I just put an episode out about this and for digital presence, right? Like I do a lot on social media, but we have to realize like even with your business, right? Everyone takes it off of social media and then they Google you, right? They want to make sure that like, oh, this person doesn't just have like a sharp social media. They want to make sure you're for real. So it's a little bit of both. It's actually almost just like equity with people, rather than just simply like I'm doing, local services ad or something like that, which we don't do. But if I was like, if you're an agent that's doing those things, you need to make sure you're posting every day. You're getting reviews almost every other day, because that's how you score higher and higher, and your Google local services ads get cheaper and cheaper for you.
It's kind of like Grant Cardone's theory of being omnipresent and not just being like really well known in one place, but like people need to make sure that you're legit everywhere. I like that. Perfect. Okay. So I want to go back to TikTok because that's actually where I found you. And what attracted me to your brand was the consistency. And you have really mastered this art of like, I'm just going to grab a microphone and I'm going to sit in front of this camera and I'm going to talk to it. And I'm going to share my expertise because I have it. So tell me a little bit about why TikTok and what was like the catalyst of your journey with trying to go viral on TikTok, or were you trying to go viral?
So I had a little bit of a weird strategy with TikTok, and people still wonder about it today. But the reason it's not that I necessarily chose TikTok. When I started just going all in on like content creation, I would be having a very similar, posting plan, if you want to call it that, content plan for all platforms. And I just very quickly noticed TikTok let you reach more organic people a lot faster.
Yeah.
Especially last summer. And it's honestly still the same. When I saw Instagram, for me, it just took too long to reach people unless you had a lot of followers already. So like for me, I didn't have a lot. It was always just, my sphere and, some other people that followed me. So when I went all in on TikTok, I already saw other agents that I was like, okay, you know what? Like, not that this means any offense, but like this person is not that knowledgeable. And look, they have 15,000 followers, 20,000 followers. And it's not like an egotistical thing, but I'm like, if I just share my message, let's see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? That kind of psyche towards it changed everything. And so when I set out on TikTok, I also have two accounts. I have a more consumer-facing, actually a purely consumer-facing account, and then I have an agent-facing account. And both I do similar things like you just said. Like I just grab my phone, I talk to it. I do some different things now, of course, but that's how I started. I literally just sat in a chair in our Natali headquarters, and I literally just sat there with a mic, with a crappy like $30 mic, because I didn't really know if this was going to take off. I didn't want to invest too much. A crappy $30 mic, little ring light for $18. And I just sat there for 2 months and said, I'm going to post twice a day for 2 months and see what happens on both accounts. So that was June and July of 23. And then obviously I grew pretty fast at that point. But what's been the most fun about TikTok specifically is I've literally grown every month. It's starting to go hockey stick now, but It's been pretty steady. You sometimes come across these accounts that have one video that went to 7 million and they have 5,000 followers and, 1.2 million likes, but then you look at all their recent stuff and it's, 200 views, 200 views, 200 views.
Yep.
I think the cool thing that I've done is literally just capture an audience and grow that audience steadily throughout the last 10, 11 months or so.
That you hit like the nail on the head, because I have a lot of clients who are kind of in that bucket where they're like, okay, like I had this one video that did well. I have no idea why. And then now the rest of my stuff is crud. And like, what do I do now? And so you're saying that you just stuck with it. You stuck with your plan. You didn't change anything. And you're just seeing it kind of exponentially grow on itself 2 times over on TikTok. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think I tell people this all the time, whether it's people in our coaching family, if it's just agents who DM me for just a little bit of help, I spend a lot of time doing it. And early on, I spent exponentially more time doing it. Now it's a couple days a week where I'm coming up with the content and whatnot. But every morning, like I wake up, I'm one of those weirdos who wakes up really early in the morning. But every morning from typically like 6 to 6:45, 7 o'clock, like I am engaged answering every single comment, every single DM. Like I am all about getting engaged with my audience. And I think a lot of people, if they even have like 1 or 2 good videos, I look at their video and I'm like, you didn't answer every comment. Like, do you know how many followers you would have gotten just if you invested that half an hour, 30, 45 minutes into replying to all those people? Because we also have to realize the way, and Instagram's changing to be somewhat similar to this. TikTok, people view the video as they read the comments. So I always see like how I've grown my following is one from the video content, but I try to be pretty witty back in the comments, and like I give people crap back. Like if I'm doing a walk tour and they're like, that house is nasty or it's overpriced, I'm like, you're probably just broke and can't afford this house. Like I shoot back at people, and I don't like fear like, oh my God, what about my brand? Are people going to judge me? You know, you have to find your tribe. We both know that. And what I find is like people will like my comment, and then they follow me. So if you're not getting engaged and like being witty or funny or just yourself back, you're losing out on a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I've learned this the hard way. I mean, I started my business in 2020 and I was so afraid of being disliked. And that's like the worst thing you could be when you're trying to build on social media, because you're going to be by, you know, you reach a certain amount of people at some point, people are going to dislike you, something about you, you know? And so by trying to make everyone happy, your content goes bland. And so you need to have some sort of personality. You need to have some sort of opinion, which everyone has, but they're kind of afraid to lean into it, I feel, sometimes on socials. What do you think?
100%, 110%, to be honest. That's the biggest fear I think people have. And it stings. Like, I remember, like, so June is really, like, I had been posting videos, like, probably once a week, once every other week, like, all that other stuff, like, before June of 23. But once I was like, I'm going to go all in on this, like I started getting an audience. And I remember I did like a day in the life video. And I was like me working out in the morning. And if you're watching this on video, you can see I'm a little bit of a bigger guy. And I remember like one of the first comments I got on my video was like, if you're working out that much, oh my God, you should be a lot thinner or something. Like you're going to die soon. Like, I'm just trying to exercise in the morning. Like this is not. And I remember like how much it stung. Right? Yeah. That first time that someone just drops something horrible about you.
Yeah.
And now 11 months later, like I feed into that. Like I just put up a video, like, you know, if you have ever watched me, you know, I'm very adamant about all the NAR stuff going on. You know, I'm very adamant on the job that we do as agents. I believe in how hard we all work. And, you know, I have no problem like fighting right back, or, you know, calling out the trolls for what they are. And I recently put up a video now that was like, it was just me putting a sign in, and it was like, you know, POV when they say all you do is open up doors. And the amount of negative comments like, oh my God, what do you think you're special because you put a sign in, not realizing that that's what I'm doing now, is just making fun of the people who come after us. So it does happen overnight. And I tell people, you know, you start to make it. And I have an agent at my company who's starting to do a lot of the walkthrough tours that I do. So you know you make it when you start to get those really negative hate comments.
Yeah.
And that's where you need someone like either your best friend, a spouse, someone that you can lean on and be like, what should I do about this? Like, I'm really hurt by it because it's scary and it feels like crap.
Yeah.
But you have to get past it. Now, you know, how I like look forward to it because it's just engagement. Yep. You know, I have a viral one on Instagram right now where like, I don't know, 95% of the comments are negative, but it's reaching, you know, almost 1 million people at this point. So It doesn't really make a difference. You actually have to find the negativity to draw the engagement in.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a girl in my subscription program. She used one of my prompts and she was like texting me every milestone. She's like, oh my God, it's at 20,000. It's at 50,000. It's at 1 million. She's like, but all the comments, not all, most of the comments are negative. I was like, girl, welcome to the club. Like, that's what it's, I mean, you're not going to make everyone happy, and that's okay. Like, you know, you're not everyone on social media is going to be your client. Not everyone's going to be your friend. And you're exactly right. Like, the negative comments fuel the fire of engagement on these platforms, and it makes you have thicker skin after a while. Unless it reflects negatively on my business, I just kind of leave it. If it reflects negatively, I delete and block and move on with my day. But other than that, it is what it is. I know who I am as a person at this point. So
yeah. And I have on my agent facing account, which I'm more talking about some of the NAR issues, like all the stuff, all the changes happening. That account, I think I have 950 people blocked from. Like, think about like how many like god awful comments that is, that I now at this point you just block them, right? Anybody who like debates me or like, you know, wants to, like, you could tell they honestly just, or they're just angry about a situation, like that's just coming from me personally. Like, they're just, whatever the comment is, I do answer them. And most times when they, especially when you have a bigger following, people don't actually they expect to just be saying it into, you know, Neverland,
the abyss.
Right?
They
didn't think you would actually answer. And then when you do, like, I get a lot of responses back like, Oh man, I'm so sorry for saying that. Like, I didn't mean it that way.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, because I'll get, like, I understand why you're saying that. However, this is what I see. We have really expensive real estate here in New Jersey, so when I do walkthrough tours, I say it's a great price. Like, I just put up a video yesterday. I was like, this is an unbelievable price for $900,000, and people are like, oh my god, how could you say it's an unbelievable price? I'm like, well, a little 2-bedroom house at this point near us is $750. So this for $900 is a great deal. You got a pool, you got a finished basement, 4 bedrooms, nice new kitchen. It actually is a great deal. It might not be in, Topeka, Kansas, but it is here.
So here's a question for you. I feel like it is very challenging to keep a consumer-facing account engaged if it's 100% real estate content. How are you seeing that with your account? Are you incorporating personal content there? What are your thoughts on that?
So I have some differing thoughts than a lot of people on this, and wholly open to some debate with you or anybody about it. But because on my consumer-facing side, I talk about the housing market, how hard it is for younger people in America to buy homes, anybody about it. But so I also have a little differing viewpoint too, because of some of not necessarily the content I put out, but the reach that I do have, especially here locally. And I'll share a story of why I changed my mind. So early on, I absolutely would. Even in my video content on TikTok or on Instagram, I would incorporate my family. I do the whole 80-20 thing. And because I thought it would resonate with people, like, okay, he's a family man, he's a proud dad, he's a proud husband. That helps connect to an audience. However, my viewpoint changed in the fall when I started having strangers DM me after seeing my family. Like, I'd get DMs like, hey, I just saw your family in Costco. Didn't want to say hi, blah, blah, blah. Like, but, big fan of everything you're doing. And it was never negative. But right. I'm like,
weird.
It's a little weird. It's also good for, like, and now I go places and people come up to me and not like hey, let me take a selfie with this guy from TikTok, but just like, oh, I see you all the time. Are you that guy? So when you're knowingly putting your family out there, because then now if they become a part of my content for my business, when my wife and son are just out at a playground and somewhere, are someone going to see them and, could they possibly be weird towards them? Mm-hmm. And that's never, and especially because I do, engage with trolls, because I also talk about very debatable issues about housing and, boomers versus millennials, like all this stuff. The last thing I ever wanted to do was put them in a situation where some crazy person is like, oh my God, you're that guy's wife. Like, I'm not going to curse on your podcast, but like, go screw yourself. Like, and who, like, just for me to get a couple more views or for people to know that I'm a family man, like, that's what changed everything for me. So I have private accounts like on Instagram and stuff like that. That's where I share pictures of my wife and son and all that stuff. People who know me personally follow me there. It's a private account, so it's not public. And then I try to mostly keep them off the other stuff. I blend it in very, very minimally so no one would actually know who they are. And then there's the whole other side of it too, especially with TikTok. You go on some of these videos where there's, a 9-year-old dancing, whether it's a boy or girl, and you look at the amount of favorites it has, and it's, no one on those accounts will ever disclose who's favoriting them, but we all know who's favoriting them. It's not the other stay-at-home moms that are about to do that same dance video. So that whole side of it changed everything for me. And I think when it comes to, putting up a picture of my son, we just had like a touch a truck thing in our community. I shared that on my Instagram story, right? But again, it's not 2 or 3% of my content is my family. But I am differing from a lot of people. I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
So, like, I'm a big believer in there's no one right way to do this, right? Like, and obviously, if you found a way that works for you, don't like break what's working, right? I think that you have found a way to create engagement with your really strong viewpoint and your really strong opinions. And I think that's awesome. I think a lot of people struggle with that. And maybe they haven't found a brand voice yet, or they're not as experienced in the industry as you yet, or, blah, 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 blah. So in order to come up with a different way to relate to people, they bring in the other pieces of their branding. I think it's a more common way to do that. I personally struggle with sharing my personal life on my business page. It's hard for me. I feel like a lot of my followers don't want to see that, but like then I do share, and then everyone loves it. So it's hard, you know. I think there's a fine line, and like I always tell my clients who have this same like question, I'm like, if it's a safety concern, keep it separate. But if it's not a safety concern, I don't see an issue with sharing your personal life if you are comfortable with it being public. But then I also think it depends on how far your reach is. If you're reaching 1 million people a day, do you really want your 10-year-old being seen by that many people? Like, that's a question you need to ask yourself as well.
You know, my TikTok on the consumer side is hitting anyway, like 2 to 5 million people per month.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like, you know, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I agree. And again, it changed as I went on. I think if you're early on in your journey, like if you're just trying to figure it out, kind of like you said, like you don't know what your content should be just yet, and you are okay with it, or your kids are okay with it. You know, my son's, he's going to be 4 in a few months, so he's young. You know, there's a whole side of it too. Like if you have a 2 or 3 year old, you know, and I talk about this with plenty of the moms in my coaching family, is if you have a young kid, what are they going to think 12 years from now if you're putting up like things that you think are cute and embarrassing? Like it could be embarrassing to them when they're 12 or 13 if it goes massively viral, like, and they become that kid. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I think there is a strategy in the beginning, like just to get you comfortable, because it's easy to share what's going on in your life. I tell people just to basically, like when I tell people strategy, it's like pick up your iPhone and you are the content. Like your life is the content. It's really that simple. Like just make everything you do, think about how this could be content. So if you're a big family person, you're a mom, you're a dad who's really involved in your kid's life, it's kind of hard not to, at least in the beginning. Once you start having that reach, I think, and you have like a stranger or two come up to you, or you get a weird DM, that's when it might change for you.
Well, and for everyone listening too, I think there's different iterations. Well, I know there's different iterations of your content strategy. So depending on, you know, where you're at in your business, where you're at, like maybe your niche is changing, maybe you move markets, maybe, you know, whatever happens with your business, maybe all of a sudden you do go viral and you have more people watching you and more eyes on you. So it's okay to change your strategy depending on what's going on. You know, your strategy is flexible. It's not set in stone. So if you are incorporating your family now and then something happens and then you're like, okay, you know, once I started incorporating the podcast snippets into my content strategy, something had to budge. So then, you know, I had to take that out to put the podcast teasers in. So everything is fluid, and you just try something out for a month or two, look at your analytics and go from there.
I think the you just had there is one of the biggest things people miss, is that you always have to be like in our code, we have a phrase, I won't curse, but we can guess what it is, but it is F it and find out. Or F around and find out. Sorry. And that's what we believe in. And like, that's what I've always believed in. And like, you can't just say like, now, if you're early on in your journey, you can't just say like, I am going to be the person who posts with my kids 3 times a week and like all this other stuff. Like platforms change, algorithms change. They change like almost every week at this point. So you have to change. And whatever you do, like I said, in the beginning, June and July of last year, probably 1 in every 4 or 5 of my videos had my family in it. Like I would do like, you know, like even like Costco tips, like to like, you know, park near the, you know, when you have a young kid, like park near by the cart return thing. So you don't have to walk a mile when you have a young kid. But that was like what I would put up in the very beginning. But then once it got, okay, wow, John, you're reaching a lot more people. Wow, someone just DM'd me that saw me at Costco. Wow, someone just DM'd me that was at the grocery store, and someone else was out at the park, and it gets a little bit weirder. And then I changed, right? And that's where my viewpoints kind of changed. And I think nobody has to, I would never, you know, and I have people in our coaching family that, you know, post with their kids, and I have no problem with it. It's just everyone has to determine what's best for them. And I think everyone should just be aware of everything that does happen, though, for themselves to make that best decision.
Definitely. Okay, so switching back, so there's a lot. It's May of 2024. There's a lot happening right now, you know, with the TikTok maybe going away. We're not sure. Instagram is making a lot of changes. What are your thoughts on trying to kind of protect or be proactive with some of these changes happening? I
think everything with the TikTok ban is highly political, and we're not going to dive into the politics of all that right here. The reason I kind of like you have right now, you know, with the podcast as well, is you have to diversify. If you're going to have content be a strategy, you can't be just one place, like literally just like you're only on TikTok, you have no Instagram, you have no Facebook presence, you have no YouTube, you have no link, like you have nothing else, because then you're literally one algorithm change can completely change your career. Not even if it got banned, like just if the algorithm changes.
Yeah.
So I have differing strategies on all platforms. However, like even recently, I've been trying to pull over my TikTok audience to my Instagram just in case it does actually get banned next year. Am I preparing for that? Not really, because I just think it's going to become an election issue where one side's going to say, hey, I'm not going to ban it, and the other side's going to say, hey, I'm going to ban it, and then we could all fight in America about it. And then after the election, they'll be like, oh, yeah, forget about that bill that we signed back in, April of 2024. But we have to prepare as if, right? Like, and that's why, I'm trying to grow my YouTube out even more and more, putting more concerted effort. The last 2 weeks, I've put a lot of effort into making content that does well on Instagram versus just TikTok. And I've had a few reels go viral in the last few weeks. And that helps you grow. And you just have to capture an audience in different areas so you're not susceptible if one of those changes. And I know a lot of people that are very heavy on Instagram who, when the algorithm changes, and it seems like they do this like once a month at this point, like where it's like you have a steady like 5 to 15,000 views, and then out of nowhere, it's like you get 30 views and 60 views, and you're like, well, what the heck happened? And it just speaks to the power of, if you're going to make content part of your strategy to get business, you have to, I think, learn one platform really well so you can start blowing up somewhere, and then at the same time be investing and learning about the other platforms as you grow, because you can't be dependent on one.
Yeah, always be learning. Tell me a little bit about the reels that went viral recently. Were there any patterns you noticed, or like how did you figure that out?
This is one of my biggest frustrations with Instagram. It's
random.
It's random. With TikTok, I kind of know when something has a good chance. There's specific types of videos I do. I'm like, this is going to do well. Sometimes it's 50,000 views. Sometimes it's 1 million views. Instagram is like, so the ones that went viral are typically more either lip syncs or meme videos. But they're random. Like some of them I'm like, this is hysterical. And then they, get 1,500 views. And then sometimes I'm like, this is hysterical. And then it got, I think one of my bigger ones has like 5 million. But there really is no rhyme or reason to it on Instagram. And I think that's part of the frustrating process for some. But that really just speaks to, you have to be consistent, because you don't know. It's kind of like the early days of TikTok. Like, if I'm going to be honest, like, you didn't really know early on in TikTok what was going to go viral. Sometimes you just put an audio to it and they would just spike. And I think we're kind of in the same point with Instagram. Like, you don't really know. You just need to be consistent with it. Would you agree?
I feel the complete opposite. I feel like I know on Instagram when something has a good chance, and I have zero clue on TikTok.
That's awesome.
But I think, that speaks to, I spend most of my time on Instagram and I just dabble on TikTok, and you're vice versa. So I think it just speaks to like, where do you invest your time and energy? That's funny.
Yeah.
But I do think, you're totally right. Humor goes a long way on Instagram, but you have to be careful, because if you go viral with a humor that has nothing to do with your business or your brand, you're going to get a whole bunch of followers that you don't want. And it's going to mess with your algorithm. So you have to be careful with that. But yeah. Beautiful. So let's say I'm an agent, just kind of turning my wheels. I've been posting for a few months. Nothing's really happening. I'm stuck in 200 view jail. What would be your advice for me?
Start having an opinion, and like a real opinion towards something.
I love that.
And I think that's where most people, I shouldn't say fail, but they don't succeed with it.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about this in the beginning of the conversation, where you're kind of more from like a negative commenter type of way, but people are so scared to put their opinion out there and get some sort of response that's like, well, what if a client sees this? Or what if a lot of people don't agree with what I'm saying? You have to get past that, or else you're really not like, there's things that, just from looking at your social media, right? Like, there's things that you feel and put out there in your channel and on your Instagram about how to grow on social media as a real estate agent. And I bet there's a whole bunch of people that disagree with you. But the reason you've captured such an audience is because you've put out that opinion. And same thing, part of the reason I had 2 accounts was because I need to figure out what agents actually need to post that people will resonate with, right? And so that's why I have the two accounts. And so, but I have an opinion on things. Like, I'm a millennial. I think, I'm fortunate in the aspect of, I worked my butt off at the late 2010s. So when COVID was happening, I was able to buy a house, like not a beautiful house. It was terrible at the time. We made it nice or nicer on a nice big piece of property here at the Jersey Shore. And I talk about zoning issues. I talk about boomers basically pulling up the ladder after them and saying, you know what? Sorry, kids, we're not going to build any more houses. Like, I talk about the Fed and keeping interest rates high. I talk about BlackRock. I talk about Vanguard. I talk about private equity coming and taking away the single family home in America. Like, these are really hot topic issues, but I have an opinion and I share them. One of the only video I can think of, not where people disagree with me. Everyone disagrees with me on that. At least one person agrees with me on every video I put up. But I have a video because we took out, and this should just make everyone feel comfortable. Like, we took out the bathtub in our master bathroom to put a nice walk-in shower. Just, my wife and I just are not bath people. We just never took baths, never were bath people. And I put up a video that was like, you can, and a lot of new constructions now are built without bathtubs. Now, there's a lot of people who love it. Don't get me wrong, but there's also a vast amount that don't or don't care.
Yeah.
So I put up a video that was like, one thing you don't have to worry about as much as you did 10 years ago is taking out your bathtub. I know so many people that sit here and force themselves to keep a bathtub for one day when they sell their house. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't really matter, at least not in our market. Like, someone really wants to, they'll put it back in. And I got I don't know if there must be like a tub gang out there or something. It was the only video where it had more comments than likes. And I must have had 1,700 comments about how awful of a man I am, how awful of a husband all these terrible things just because I said you could take a tub out of your house before you sell it if you want to enjoy a nice walk-in shower. And I just couldn't believe it. But that you have to, if that's your worst case, right? I put up a video after, I was like, I apologize to those that love their tubs. I didn't mean to offend you or tell you can't take a tub or you can't put a tub in when you buy a house. I was just sharing with people, you do not need a damn tub anymore in a seller's market to sell a house. Because honestly, 2013, when I would go to sell a house, there would be buyers would be like, oh no, there's no tub in here. I can't bathe my kids. Again, it was a complete buyer's market, but I was like, it's not that way anymore. People don't care as much. And I must have just hit that side of tub gang. And I think supposedly there was a video before me where she said she regretted taking out her tubs. And she was like, oh, my life is so awful because I took out all the tubs. I have 5 bathrooms. And it was a home designer influencer. And I must have just caught the wind off of that one. And man, that was ugly. But all to the point, I know it's a long-winded story, but it's all to the point that if you don't have an opinion, people will never really care what you have to say. You can't play Switzerland and expect content to work.
Yep. I feel like that's when you've made it on socials, is when you have to post a follow-up video to address the mass comments.
Yeah.
Because it's just you just weren't expecting the mass opinions. But anyways, my other thought that I had as you were talking is I do think it's kind of a generational thing of we're scared to be disagreed with. And I'm a retired 8th grade teacher. And one thing that I worked with my students on is we had, we used to call them bounce cards, but we had sentence frames that we used. And one of the sections was how to disagree with someone nicely or respectfully. And it was I hear your point, but, or I see what you're saying, however. And so I feel as millennials, we didn't really get a lot of that. We just we hear disagreement and we think we did something wrong. And I feel maybe that's kind of part of the reason we're a little bit scared to put ourselves out there, because we don't want to get that feedback. I don't know. That's just something that I was thinking about.
I 100% agree. I think if we're being honest, and this is what drives me to create more content and find people that want to do this type of thing to get business, because it obviously works. It works immensely. But you have a little bit something different in you when you're willing to do that. And I would say, especially millennial and under, we'll see what happens with Gen Alpha, because they seem to have that where they're like, I don't really give a crap, but they're not here just yet in the real estate industry, is that like real fear. And I would say like 80 to 85% just are unwilling to do it. And that just is what fires me up, because I know nobody that's doing what I'm trying to do with like the coaching company, owning a real estate brokerage, recruiting, like doing all these different things. Like I talk to these super successful, like have sold thousands of homes, like absolutely crushed it in their lives, their careers. They own a brokerage and they're 57 years old or 62 years old or 67. And I'm like, why are you not like sharing your expertise? And like, do you realize like how much that would help you recruit people, and like how much you could offer in terms of expertise to people? And they're like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable. You sat in like some of the hardest negotiations. You sold millions of dollars, properties that were $5-6 million, and you're scared of I don't get it, but I do understand that a lot of people have the fear to do it.
Absolutely. This has been such a fun conversation. Where can everybody find you?
So if you're a real estate agent, which I'm figuring you are, if you're listening to this, or a real estate professional or business owner, on TikTok and Instagram, it's John C. Natale, my handle. And if you want to see what I'm doing on the consumer facing side, so you can also learn a little bit about what helps and what helps business, it's the John Natale, both on Instagram and TikTok, and YouTube, I think it's just John C. Natale. And podcast is Getting Real, but keep listening to this one.
Love it. Thanks so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.